Take that on.
This is Damian Macy of the Marshall Public Library Oral History Project, and today is November the 11th, or 13th, I'm sorry.
Yeah, 13th.
And we are here with J.D. Spangler, and he is not originally from Marshall, I don't think, is he?
Well, I was born actually in Akron, Ohio, but moved to Casey when I was 1
Oh, okay.
and lived in Casey through my 7th grade year and moved to Marshall the summer of '63. And I graduated from Marshall High School in 1968.
That wasn't very far back.
No, just a couple years ago. So I've got Clark County covered. You know, I grew up and lived in Casey till I was 13, moved here, graduated through high school. I do, you know, I really consider more Marshall my hometown than Casey, although I've got strong roots in both. But I moved back to Marshall, and we can discover I was gone for a long time. 30 years, and moved back, and it was a great decision to bring me and my family back here.
When you left, what were you, or where you were located, and what did you do there?
Here's what I did. I've been lucky. I was lucky to work in radio broadcasting for 50 years. That's a good run. And for almost all of my career, radio was really the internet. So before the internet came along and really became popular in the early 2000s, you know, radio is where everybody went to get, you know, primary radio was to get the latest music, the latest celebrity news, a lot of the local news. You know, that and some TV stations, of course.
And also it was big for politics, as we're got a different environment now.
Yes. So radio, I remember as a kid, and almost everybody I knew listened to the radio 2-3 hours a day. And it was like a major part. You know, there was studies done that 99% of the households in America had a radio. And so it was a great medium to be in. And so I did radio, and I lived in a variety of places. Princeton, Indiana was my first job. Then Evansville, Indiana. Then Jackson, Mississippi.
Ooh. Then
Chattanooga, Tennessee. Then I came back to Evansville. Then I went to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I started, and all this was before I was 30 years old.
Now, were those all related to radio and broadcasting?
Yeah, every job I've had out of high school has been in radio. I got a part-time job when I went to junior college down in Mount Carmel. And I got a part-time job while I was in college, and a full-time job right after college, and have worked in radio ever since.
Did you think somewhere, maybe even back in high school, that I'm going to work in radio?
Oh, yeah.
What directed you to that business?
Well, like a lot of people of that era, I grew up listening to WLS in Chicago. And I thought it was so cool. Those DJs, I thought, boy, wouldn't it be fun to talk on the radio and to get paid to do it? I go, how cool would that be? And I just loved it from the time I was 15. I knew what I wanted to do. I'm one of the lucky ones that knew what I wanted to do from age 15. And the way radio worked back then, and still does to a certain degree, it's changed a lot, is you kind of start out. And there was no satellite, there was no automation. Every radio station had live DJs all the time they were on.
Their own tower.
Right, so you're on all the time. So you usually worked in smaller markets and worked your way up. Kind of like baseball. You know, in baseball you have the minor leagues and then they work real hard to get to the major leagues. So that's kind of how radio was back in the 60s when I started. So, you know, I was working the smaller markets, and then I got a chance to work in Chicago. And my first go round in Chicago, I ended up working there twice, didn't go as well, but it gave me great experience. And then I went to San Francisco and was lucky enough to put the first FM country music station on the air in San Francisco. This was 1981. And it was a great success because that whole area, the San Francisco Bay Area, there's a lot more, you know, people just think of San Francisco as this, now especially, kind of a weird place. But, you know, there was a lot of country music fans out there, and we did really, really well. And that made me famous in the country radio landscape across America. They go, wow, he did really well out there. Who's that guy? And so I worked there for almost 5 years. And then I got a job in Chicago, which is kind of where I wanted to be, growing up here, being a big sports fan for the Cubs and the Bears and Illinois football and basketball, things like that.
Did you kind of hate to leave San Francisco, though?
You know, I didn't. It was beautiful. When I drove into work, I could see the mountains on one side and the ocean on the other. I didn't live in the city. I lived in what they call the East Bay, kind of in the Hayward, Fremont area.
Oh, okay.
And I met my wife there. And no, I told her when we got married I would want to move back to the Midwest. I thought that was a better place to raise our kids and stuff. And we didn't have any yet. We waited till we got to the Midwest. But she was okay. She was okay with that. It took her a while to get used to the winters, but...
She was from San Francisco?
Yeah, she grew up in the Bay Area. Okay. When she was a small child, she lived in Milwaukee, but she didn't remember, you know, they moved to California when she was young. So the thing is, in 1988, I moved to Chicago. 88 to 1998, I worked there 10 years. I did the morning show and was the program director. And the radio station, thankfully, had unprecedented success. For 6 of those 10 years, we were the most listened to country music station in America. More listeners than any country station in America, which was very, you know, I was very proud of that fact. Had a lot of great people working with me and for me. And CBS, about halfway through that, a small company owned us when I went there. But because of the tremendous success, they sold it to CBS for a huge profit. And I knew after about 2 years that it probably wouldn't be a long-term thing for me. One of my flaws is I don't do really well in big corporate situations. I like to have a lot of autonomy. I don't like to answer to a lot of different people, especially when I think I know more than they do. So, like I said, it's probably a flaw, but it had worked well for me all those years. And so I told my wife, I said, we probably got another couple years, and then we'll probably need to do something else.
Did you live in Chicago?
No, we lived in a suburb of Naperville, which is a western suburb. I had to have grass. I had to have a good school system for our kids, you know. So it was 40 miles from, I worked at the John Hancock Center. And lucky doing the morning show, I went in at like 4:30 in the morning. So the traffic was fine.
You did drive in then?
I drove in every
Taking a
morning.
train or something?
Well, the trains didn't get me in time because my show started at 5:30 in the morning, and the train didn't get in till like 5:40. So I didn't mind driving. So I drove in the morning. Going was fine. Coming home, it took me like an hour and a half to get home. But the traffic is it's something you get used to, but you never really enjoy.
Don't you think the environment there today is quite different than when you were there?
Yeah, it's gotten worse since I was there. It wasn't bad when I was there, but it has progressively gotten worse. And obviously, certain parts of the city are parts you don't want to go to, and other parts are okay, and some are middling. It's like any major metropolitan area. But I really enjoyed the time there, but it was time to leave. It was like, hey, I'm a small town guy. In my heart, in my gut, I'm a small town guy. And when I came back to visit, my family, I noted, Marshall didn't have a station when I was a kid. And the people, they were awarded a radio license, I think in 83 or 4, somewhere around there. And the first owners, no offense to them, didn't really know how to run it properly. And matter of fact, they did so poorly that they just finally abandoned. I mean, they tried to sell it. Nobody would buy it for what they wanted, and they just turned it off. I mean, the station just went dark.
Was that originally out of Casey?
No, it was here. It was out in Clark Center,
Blue box.
the old blue box that rocks, which was one of the great marketing slogans of all time, except the product was not very good, apparently, because no one listened to it. But they all knew the blue box on old Route 40. But then, I guess, somewhere in they tried it for like 10 years, the original owners, who were out of the Tuscola area. Then they just turned it off. And then a guy, an engineer from Columbus, Ohio, bought it. Kurt Tuckerman was his name, who was a nice enough guy, but he was an engineer and didn't know anything about programming and what to put on the air to make people want to listen. But he had it up and running for a couple of years. And when I knew I was leaving Chicago, I knew my contract wasn't going to be renewed. I knew that either one of us didn't, there's no way. So I came down here and talked to him about it. And Kurt's a real nice guy, but he was trying to take advantage of me initially. He said the price he wanted was way out of range. So we negotiated for a few months and finally got it to something reasonable. I still paid too much for it, but that's okay. What's interesting about this is when I first bought the station, everything about it was out of date. The tower was about to fall down. The transmitter was 40 years old. The console, the audio board was antiquated. He had no music library. He had nothing. It was basically he just ran a satellite, service.
You had to really start from scratch then almost.
So I tell people, I bought this radio station. I had to put up a new tower, new transmitter. I had to buy a music library, a production library, music behind commercials and things of that nature. I had to buy a new console. We moved the studio. Well, first of all, we moved the tower over where Danke's Pine Patch is. And that's where we put the new tower. We had to get FCC approval and all that, but we did all that. We moved the studio downtown above the Cold Insurance Agency. And, so we put the studio together and, got to work. So we had to invest, hundreds of thousands of dollars I always tell people back in 1998, I go, I invested over $600,000 so I could sell commercials for $5 a piece. There's no business plan in the world that would have okayed that, right? There's no.
But those dollars today would be many times that.
Yeah, and I was lucky to be in a situation where I didn't have to get a loan, but it strained our finances. But I will say that the community was very welcoming, because when I first came to town, I went to the Optimist Club and the Rotary Club and the Lions Club, and I told them, and this is actually even before I took over, because the way it works is you make an agreement with the owner, like for him to sell and for you to buy, but then the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, has to okay the sale. So that usually takes them 3 months to okay the transfer of power. So in that time, I went to these service clubs, and I'd go to the VFW, the Legion, and over to Tom's, which I still call it Tom's Rudy's, and different places, just to let them know I'm coming and what we're going to do. And I told everybody, look, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to carry all, and this is before you could do any internet stuff, okay? So I'm going to broadcast all the Marshall football and basketball games, all of them. Home and away, every game. I'm going to guarantee I do that for 1 year, whether we get any sponsorships or not. I'm hoping to get sponsorships, but my point is I'm committing to you that we're going to do that. We're going to do live local news and sports. We're going to promote local community events. We are going to talk about things that go on in this community, talk about the people who live in this community, and we're going to give you a good local radio station that focuses on Marshall and Clark County. That was my first goal. Is, I had to bring Casey in too, because there's not enough money. There's not enough business. So I go, we got to be a Clark County radio station. And I went to Casey's service groups too. I couldn't carry their sports at that time because I wanted to get all the Marshall stuff first. Okay. But what I found out is that I picked up Casey softball, because you might know that their girls teams still are really good, but back then they were even better. They won 7 state championships. So I carried their softball game, not every one of them, but I carried like 30. A tremendous amount of their softball games, which got me, because of the Marshall-Casey rivalry, that gave me a little halo effect in Casey. And the fact that I actually lived there till I was 13 years old helped, and I knew just enough people. Most of them are passing away, but at that time, I knew just enough people to give me legitimacy, so to speak. And then I found out, I was looking at the basketball schedules, and there were like 12 to 14 games that Casey played that weren't on the same night as Marshall. So I carried about half of their games in basketball as well. Now football, they played the same time. So that took till we got the internet so we could do the video streaming. But the community was welcoming. But for 5 years, The first 5 years, it was me and my wife and one part-time helper. And you know who that part-time helper was? Tim Sanders.
Oh.
Tim was 14 years old at that time.
Oh.
And he would be what we call a board operator. Like when I was out broadcasting all those sporting events, he'd be back in the studio playing the commercials and what we call running the board. A board operator is what that's called. And Tim, of course, has gone on to great success. General manager of Channel 2 in Terre Haute, and he's been very successful. You can tell by the look of his house down on Route 1. So I always like to say, hey, I gave him his start, okay? And Tim worked for me through high school, and even when he went to Lakeland, and then of course he got a job at Channel 2, and the rest is history. But so when my kids got old enough, they took over for Tim. So my kids would be the board operator while I was out doing the ball games, which is great. They did that all through high school.
What are your children's age and names now?
Well, when we moved here, they were in 5th and 7th grade.
Okay.
So Paige would be my oldest. Let me guess here now. I got to get it right. She's like turning 39 in December, which is next month. And my youngest daughter is 36. Paige lives in the Chicago area. She went to college up in that area and got married to a man that she met in college. And they've stayed in the Naperville area all that time. And they have one child, so I have one granddaughter there. My youngest daughter went to college in Indianapolis. Her name is Julia. And she got a job in the Indy area after college. She didn't get married till like 4 or 5 years ago to a man from Indianapolis that she met at work, where she worked, which was for Progressive Insurance at the time.
Oh, yeah.
She has since started her own business. She's really into the green ecology thing, and started her own business. And they have recently bought a 5-acre plot of land and a homestead down by Bloomington, Indiana. Now, he still works for Progressive Insurance. Her husband, he's in the IT department, and both of them can work from home due to the internet. So they both get to work at home. She has to travel with her job sometimes. But so they've both got their degrees and been successful, thankfully, and both graduated from Marshall High School.
Did they stay at all in touch on the radio and broadcasting?
You know, they didn't. By the way, I did have them on the air.
That's what.
Yeah, they were both on the air with me from junior high on through high, and even their college days, they would come home occasionally, would still go on the air with me from time to time. And Paige, my oldest daughter, actually got a degree in radio broadcasting and worked several part-time jobs in the Chicago area, but she decided that wasn't really what she wanted to do. And if you don't love it, you don't want to do it.
Sure.
You got to love it to really be good at it, to be long-term successful. And she's always been very creative artistically, and she made jewelry and things of that nature. She sold products on Etsy, which is some sort of internet program that I'm not familiar with, but people go there and buy jewelry and things. But what has happened, she also did interior design. She took a minor in interior design, and she does a little bit of that on the side. But now she's gotten into real estate.
Oh.
So she's, and her husband has a really good job. He's one of these internet IT/web creator things that I don't quite totally get, right?
I don't either.
But they've done, they live apparently very comfortably. When I go visit, it looks like they're doing just good, fine. So I'm lucky that they're doing well. And then, by the way, I owned the station for 22 years, from 98 all the way to 2020, the big pandemic year. And I was looking to retire for the last couple of years before that, right from 2018. I was getting ready. I said, hey, I just want to do something else. But I wanted to sell it to somebody who would keep it local, Clark County, Wabash Valley, make sure they're still doing the Marshall sports and the Casey sports and all that. And so I didn't want to sell it to somebody that may try to move it to Terre Haute, or move it to Charleston or something, because Casey had a station and they moved it to Charleston.
Okay.
Paris had a station, they moved it to Terre Haute. So we really, the last 10, 15 years that I owned it, we not only focused on Clark County, but Edgar County as well, because Paris didn't have a station anymore. So they had somebody doing their sports on internet, but we did the local news up in Paris. We would talk to the Paris mayor from time to time, the football, basketball coach in Paris, things like that. So Joey O'Rourke, from a lot of O'Rourke's in Marshall, he went to work for me. He started doing the ball games with me. He did them with me for like 7 years. Ultimately, I ended up hiring him full time, and he became a salesman. And he also worked. We did a morning show together for a while, and he wanted to buy it. But then again, there's one little thing called money. So, he would be the guy that I thought could do it. I thought Tim Sanders could do it, which he could. And Tim was interested for a while, but then the TV thing was going so well for him that he decided he probably should stay with TV, which was great because less than a year later, he became the general manager. So that was a good, I figured, I knew Tim could do it. Tim's a real go-getter, hard worker, smart. Joey's is the same. Joey's a real hard worker. He's focused, he's passionate. But getting the money situation worked out, which we ultimately did, and sold it to him, and he took over in May of 2020. And of course, that was a tough year to take over with the pandemic.
Yes.
And I asked him, I go, do you want to delay it? Because I even told him, we can delay it if you want. He said, no, which is good, because and he's done a great job. Joey has done a great job, and has now bought a couple of more stations in Terre Haute. So he's a young man. He's like 36 now. And so he was only like 32 when he bought these stations. Young man, a lot of energy, and he's doing really well, working really hard. And, people have mentioned to me, and I appreciate it. I mean, people have actually thanked me for buying the station and doing what I did with all the coverage we've given the local athletes, the school system in general, all the service clubs and what they do, helping the city with all of the projects they do, the Autumn Fest and the Halloween Frolic and the Christmas activities and the public pool and everything. That's what we're here for. When radio was originally designed way back in the 30s and 40s, it was designed to serve the local community. And a lot of radio stations abandon the local community to serve a bigger community because they think they can make more money. And I wanted to serve Clark County. And that's what we've done, and that's what Joey continues to do. So it was a project of passion. It's something I love being on the radio. I love it. And I loved serving the community. I was lucky enough to work in the second and the fourth largest markets in the country. Chicago, number 2, the San Francisco Bay Area is number 4. I had, luckily, great success in both markets, but I've had just as much fun working in Marshall, Illinois, as I did. I told people one day when I went to work at the John Hancock Center, I go, more people come to work at the John Hancock Center than live in my hometown.
Sure.
But having the success we had here in Marshall and Clark County in the Wabash Valley gave me just as much gratitude and happiness as I had in both the San Francisco Bay Area and Chicago.
So the bottom line was it was more rewarding for you.
Yeah, personally. Mm-hmm. Not monetarily, but personally, the satisfaction. And, when we moved back to do this, my wife and I, we didn't change anything about our lifestyle. I mean, we never felt the urge to buy Rolls Royces or Mercedes, which are fine. We basically drive Ford Explorers or GMC Jimmys or whatever.
Get you there just fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just, and we don't live poorly, but we don't live extravagantly. Never did. Never had the urge to do that. I mean, just comfortably. Give me a nice house big enough, give me a big screen TV to watch my sports and a comfortable bed and a rocking chair, I'm good,
With the changes that you saw taking place, and obviously television bloomed and blossomed during that period, especially the 70s and 80s, did you ever have a desire to add television to your...
No.
Okay.
As somebody once told me, I've got a face made for radio. Okay. But I really didn't. I loved radio. I loved the theater of the mind. In that era, in the 70s and 80s, most televisions, like a big TV, would be like a 27-inch TV.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe a 30-inch.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. That's a fancy one. And I go, television's limited to a 27-inch screen. Radio, it's only limited by your mind. And I loved doing basketball and football and play-by-play, trying to create a picture that you would create in your mind when you hear me talk. I love that. I loved it better than that when the video came for the internet, because now you can see it, which is good, but I liked it when you couldn't, so I could paint the picture.
Well, I can think back, there was a lot of sound effects you used.
Yes.
And those, to me, kind of stimulated the mind of, you could visualize what was happening just by hearing it.
Yeah.
Fibber McGee's Closet.
Yes. Before television was as popular as it was, there were, I remember my grandmother when I was very young, 7, 8 years old, going to visit her, and she would be listening to what would be a TV show now on radio, with all the sound effects and everything else.
My grandmother listened to one every day. I think it was called Stella Dallas or something like that. Yeah. And that was just a part of her daily activity.
Yeah.
We had to listen to that.
Well, really, TV didn't really become a household item until the early 50s.
Yeah.
And I was born in 1950. So a lot of people didn't have a TV, especially older people. Like if you were 60 years old in 1950, you may not have got a TV till 57, 58, because you were still listening to the radio.
And the prices were still pretty high.
Oh, they were extremely high. Are you kidding? I remember this is one thing I remember distinctly. 1973, I bought a 19-inch color television. Cost $379. And I was making $140 a week. So, I mean, that was a huge purpose. Color TV. 19-inch, and by the way, it was huge. To carry it, it was like, it was unbelievable.
And the tube of that was about 3 feet in the back.
Oh yeah, the tube was way bigger than I mean, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Now, you can buy a 50-inch TV that weighs like 14 pounds or something. And at home, I've got a 55-inch TV, and that's not big enough. In my basement, my wife wouldn't let me put it in the living room. In my basement, I've got an 88-inch.
Oh my.
And then in the bedroom, I've got like a 35-inch, and it seems so teeny. I mean, it's crazy.
That 88-inch, don't you have to get to the next county almost, so you're not...
Well, it was hard to get down there, I'll tell you that. We'll never get it out, okay? That TV is never leaving that room.
And you go down the street and you can see some houses, there's a light coming through the windows.
Oh yeah,
And
it's the TV.
Lights the whole room.
Yeah, you don't even need a light.
Back to radio.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I owned the station for 22 years. In 2020, May of 2020, Joey O'Rourke took over. He bought it. He's done a great job. I've retired now. My two loves, other than my family, of course, were radio and sports. I'm a very avid sports fan. I take it to the point of ridiculousness, probably. So now I focus all my extra time basically on sports. I watch a sporting event virtually every day. On Saturdays and Sundays, I mean, that's what I watch all day. I mean, just morning to night. I mean.
Do you have some hobbies?
Well, my hobby is that. And my last physical hobby, as my body continues to deteriorate, is shooting pool.
Oh.
And I shot pool as a kid at the old Coles pool room right here in Marshall, and Hutch.
Just almost across the street a little bit.
Yeah, Hutch had a pool room, and so I shot pool. For anybody listening to this wants to go way back, I would not suggest this, but when I was 12 years old, I actually went to Charlie Schaefer's pool room in Casey. I had a paper route, and when I got done with the paper route, I walked by there and just never played in my life. Walked in, and a kid I knew who was a couple of years older than me was there, and I played a game, horribly of course, because you've never played. But I started playing, much to the chagrin of my mother. Don't go to that pool room. And then we moved here, and of course, Coles was also a newsstand.
Yeah.
So back in that era, the reputation of a pool room was not very good. You didn't want to hang out in the pool room, especially if you were 12 or 13 years old. But Coles was a newsstand. So I told Mom, I got a newsstand. And of course I got a paper route too. So, I had to be
Sure.
So I played pool quite a bit up until I got a full-time radio job. So at 21, 20, I focused on, my radio career and would only play very rarely, maybe 2-3 times a year. And then in my early 40s, I was in Chicago and I got the urge to play because a place I went to watch sports had a bunch of pool tables. At that era, pool was becoming kind of a cool thing. Okay, kind of a date night thing. There was a movie called The Color of Money with Paul Newman and Tom Cruise. Came out in like 89.
I heard of it, but I didn't go to it.
In the late 80s. And that kind of sparked, by the way, bowling alleys started putting pool tables in, So this was a bar / sports bar that had big screen TVs to watch sporting events. And it had like 10 pool tables. So I would go there to watch sporting events, and I saw the pool tables. I said, well, maybe I'll start playing again. And I got in a pool league in the early 90s and played for about, 3-4 years. Then I moved back here. And getting all this started took all my time, and doing all the, I was doing like 80 sporting event, broadcasting 80 basketball, football, softball games a year. So also doing the morning show, also selling the advertising, also recording the advertising. So I was busy. So I didn't play again until about 2013. In that range, and I played like 3 years until the Cubs won the World Series in 2016, and then I quit again. And about a year ago, this being 2024 when we record this, I picked it up again, and I enjoy it. The pool league is in KZ, and we play just one night a week, Wednesday nights. So me and a couple of other people in similar age group, but the league has all ages. So we're playing guys in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and we're in our 70s, and we're doing quite well actually, but it's fun.
Are all of those in Casey, or do you go other places?
The league is in KZ and Greenup, so I have to kind of go west. Now, there's things in Terre Haute, but the time difference and everything, so we're going that way. We're hoping that Marshall would get some good pool tables, but there's no good pool tables in Marshall.
You have one in your basement?
I don't, but I wish I could. My wife has decided that's not a good idea.
The TV set takes it all up.
TV, she goes, you got that big tree, you got that big TV.
With your retirement now, do you play golf or any of that?
No.
Okay.
I watch sports. There are some TV shows I like. I mean, I'm a Yellowstone fan. There's a TV series with Sylvester Stallone called Tulsa King that I like. A couple of things on the streaming services that I watch, and then sports. And I read a lot, but basically about current events and non-fiction. I'm not a big fiction guy. So I read stories about successful people. I don't think I'm going to take on any new big projects, but even when I was younger, I like to know what were the traits of people that became very successful in their career, whether it be a military person like Patton and Eisenhower. I read their biographies and books about them, as well as a few others. And also people in industry, even going way back to Andrew Carnegie and
There have been some interesting ones about the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers and
Right.
all of that period.
Right. Yeah, I'm a big history buff. I've been reading up on the Revolutionary War, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes our school systems have made, because that's the whole reason America exists, is because of these incredibly brave patriots. I mean, people don't realize that the richest people with the most to lose put it all on the line for this, to create this country. These people were the rest of their life was going to be fine anyway. They were already wealthy. Now, they didn't like what the British were doing to them, but they were still going to be okay. And they risked it all, because if they lost, the British weren't going to be nice to them.
But so many of those people in the late 1800s anyway were very successful. They were even more successful because there was no income tax.
Well, of course.
That of course helped their fortunes, but most of them put that to good use too.
They did. They did. Yeah, so the Revolutionary War, when you really had farmers and store clerks, and yes, we had help from the French, thankfully, at the end. We needed that big. We had some help even from some Native Americans, and we had some help even from some Canadian, although they were British. We had help from several, but bottom line is, it was the biggest upset really in the history of the world. Because at that time, you know, the British Commonwealth was the most powerful army in the world by far.
And covered a lot of geography.
Oh yeah, well, what's the old line? The sun never sets on the British Empire. So they first of all underestimated us. They were pompous and arrogant, and we could all learn a lesson from that. And you know, even when we feel really good about ourselves, we need to remember that we're very vulnerable. But learning more about that, and you know, I was so depressed when I talked to, I have some grandchildren that are college students, and I said, give me liberty or give me death. They don't know who said that. You people our age, are you kidding? I go, surrender, I've not yet begun to fight. They don't know who John Paul Jones is or Patrick Henry. Are you kidding?
Don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes.
Right. I mean, it's, you know, we don't spend enough time. This is how we became created. And I know you have to condense history as we keep getting more of it, but don't forget how we started. The sacrifices and the great strategies used. You know, Valley Forge and that New Year's, now I'm even forgetting whether it was New Year's or Christmas raid that Washington led.
I think it was Christmas.
Yeah, I think it was Christmas as well. You know, it's amazing what we accomplished. And I think we've gone, and by the way, I want all history taught. But I don't want us to focus just on the good things or just on the bad things. Hey, who doesn't have flaws? Every country in the history of the world has flaws and things they would do differently if they could do it differently.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because the other night on television, they interviewed some very young people who fought in the Revolutionary War. I think it was it China?
They don't even know who we fought.
And who who won the Civil War? What? I mean, they didn't even know what Civil War meant.
And these are college students who don't, like, I saw one of these man on the street things.
That's what this was.
Yeah, and they're asking people going to college, like, who did we fight in the Revolutionary War? And you're right, they're saying like Russia, China, Vietnam. What? You know, and then who did we fight in World War II? They don't even know that.
They interviewed this one lady. There was a big flag flying back there, and he asked her how many stripes are in that flag. She said, well, I don't know, it's waving so much I can't count them. That was her answer.
Well,
no idea.
You know, the thing, you know, we're at this point in our life, we're dealing with this huge immigration challenge where anywhere from 12 to 20 million unvetted people have come into the country. And the unvetted part is the part that is the most disturbing, because we understand we're a country of immigrants. So we are all, people don't understand, we're for immigration, but it's got to be under the laws we have existed. There's a reason you vet people. You don't want to let murderers and rapists and drug dealers and human traffickers into the country.
But we've got a bundle of them now.
Oh, we do. We do. But there's a reason you go through a process to become an American citizen. By the way, people who become American citizens the correct way know way more about this country than people who grew up here.
Right.
Because they're forced to learn the history of our country. And the reason you do that is so they can assimilate to our way of life. Now, that doesn't mean they have to give up the traditions of their country. Doesn't mean that we can't learn from the traditions of their country. It just means in this country, here are the things we hold most important, and it's important for you to assimilate to those things. Like, for instance, let's use this as an example. If I was going to move to Spain or Italy and live there, that's where I was going to move to, I would certainly not expect them to adjust to me. It's up to me to adjust to them.
Sure.
So when people come into our country, and we have people in our country say, well, we should learn their ways. No, they need to learn our ways. Now, we will become, what's the word I'm looking for? Respectful of their traditions. We'll become respectful, but you've got to be respectful of ours. Because you're moving to our country. If you want everything your way, then stay in your country.
But do you ever look at the instructions or anything that comes along with the product anymore? It's in 2 or 3 languages.
Yes.
And to me, that's your point. They needed to learn our...
Yeah. If I was going to live in Italy,
You'd learn it.
I would learn to speak Italian. I would learn the Italian traditions. I would learn the Italian holidays and what they mean and what they stand for. I would learn their culture. Now, I wouldn't give up mine, some of the things I like, but I would, hey, if I'm going to live in Italy, I need to learn how to be a little bit Italian. So people who come to America need to learn how to be American, as well as keeping the most valuable traditions in their life that they hold most important. Not against that. But I am against us acquiescing to everything for them. Like, for instance, if people move here, they need to learn our language.
They're right.
You know, it's not up to us to learn your language, you know, and you need to be able to take care of yourself. You know, I wouldn't expect to move to Italy and for them to pay for my food, clothing, and shelter, and my medical bills. That's presumptuous and arrogant to think that.
But that's the problem with the problem we have now. These people have their hand out for everything, and they're giving it.
Yeah.
I mean, they get it.
Well, I think that's going to stop.
I think so too. I hope so.
I think that's going to stop, and it should. You know, hey, I'm all for anybody coming that can make our country better.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and there's been a lot of people, first generation, that have been fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, the new senator in Ohio, name's Moreno, he wasn't even born here. He didn't move here until he was 5 years old. And the family came, they had nothing. Now he's a multimillionaire, maybe even a billionaire, because, you know, he learned how to work in America, started his own company, sold his company, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's how it works. Now, not everybody can do that, But everybody can learn to provide food, clothing, and shelter for themselves. Everybody can learn to provide food, clothing, and shelter. What we need to do is, here's the thing. I'm for a helping hand. I am not for unlimited, never-ending charity. I will help you, but at some point, the handouts have to end. It can't be generation after generation after generation. We have that going on in the major metropolitan areas right now. There are people that they think that's the way of life. They're a, welfare mama, welfare child, it just keeps going. Their whole life, they live their whole life on government assistance.
Mm-hmm. And they expect it.
And that's wrong. By the way, that's bad for them, and it's bad for the taxpayer. It's bad for, it's like people say you have no empathy. No, I have plenty of empathy. I think you're smart enough to figure out how to make a living. You're saying they're too dumb to figure it out. I'm saying no, they've got every ability to make a living and support themselves.
In every town, small, large, you see signs everywhere, hiring, hiring, hiring.
There's jobs.
So there's jobs.
There's jobs. And, we got to change, I also thought we should start every school day with positive reinforcement. You can be anything you want to be if you're willing to put the work in. I believe in you. You have every skill it takes to be successful at whatever you choose, as long as you put the work in and you're passionate about it and you don't give up. Teach that for a half hour to begin the day. Teach that for a half hour at the end of the day. First thing they hear in the morning, the last thing they hear when they go home. You can do this. You have the skills, but you got to put the work in. You can't play the victim forever. You cannot play the victim. Number one, it doesn't work. It doesn't help you to play the victim. If it helped you, I would say do it. It doesn't help. Everybody's got a problem. Everybody's got a plan. Everybody's got things going against them.
But somewhere in that span of that school day too, they need to know a little bit more about geography and history.
Yes, absolutely. They need to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and all that. But we don't have enough. The school system, by the way, the public school system is generally broken, especially in the major metropolitan areas.
It's terrible.
It's pitiful. And we've allowed it to be taken over by people who don't hold people responsible. And this whole thing about, they're marginalized, they're forgotten. No, they're not. No one's forgotten. I was lucky enough to be a boss at age 26. Hired people to work at radio stations from 26 all the way till I retired at age 70. And in the big cities, where it's all diverse, I hired Black, Asian, Hispanic,
Sure.
women, of course, gays. No problem with any of it. Because I hired people who wanted to work, and when I hired them, I made clear what their responsibilities were. And all the people I hired, I only had to fire one in all those years. Now I had to fire a bunch of people I inherited, most of them white males, by the way. So thinking that white males got the easy ride, that's the ones I fired. And people I hired, I made sure, the best of my ability, that they were going to fit. And, I promoted work ethic. We do what it takes to get it done. There's no excuses.
Yeah.
If something's going wrong, what went wrong, how are we going to fix it?
Mm-hmm.
That's how it works. We don't have this innocent bystander. That's one of America's favorite pastimes, is playing innocent bystander. Well, what could I do? You start playing the victim and innocent bystander, believe me, your life's not going to be that good. It's not going to, and by the way, throughout your life, you're going to have people disappoint you. You're going to have bosses that maybe mistreat you or maybe unfairly fire you even. By the way, I forgot to put this in my radio career. I was fired 5 times. I was fired 5 times, and every time I got a better job. Every time, because I didn't whine about getting fired. First of all, usually when you get fired, all but one of them I saw coming. All but one of them, I knew that it wasn't going to work. Now, maybe the exact day I didn't know, but my point is hey, this is not quite right.
But you didn't sit back and play victim.
No. When I was done, I go, I've got skills. Somebody's going to want to hire me. All but once. Once I did get blindsided. But my point is, that doesn't define that doesn't define me.
No.
And yeah, that was wrong. And all of them were wrong, but they were, in my business there was a lot of philosophical difference, so it wasn't, showing up late or anything like that. It was just like, okay, we just disagreed on how the station should sound, or how what the DJ should say or not say and all that. But I never felt victimized, because first of all, the world isn't fair. Get over this fair routine. Uh-oh. I shouldn't have brought my phone in, I'm sorry. Sorry. But I hate it when anybody plays the victim, but especially with people I know. It's like, get over, it's not going to be fair. Be so good they can't ignore you. That's my, hey, and believe in what you believe if you're in a professional business of some sort. If you work as a secretary or in a support position, or if you work in a factory position, be on time. Do your job. One of the best things my dad ever told me was, if you're on time, you'll always have a job at some kind. If you just show up, all you got to do is show up on time. That's where the bar is. Mm-hmm. And you'll always have a job doing something. Show up on time, do your job, and keep your mouth shut. Now, that didn't apply to my job because I had to talk, but and if you're in a professional job, like Damien, you were a professional in the investment business for many years. In my job, I had to have strong beliefs in how I think a radio station should sound. Because when I first came here, some of my friends even said, "You sure you want to do this?" And I said, "Here's the deal. If you give the people, because 2 other people owned it and it didn't work. When I bought the station, they had 4 advertisers. 4, total of 4. And after I got going, we had over 100. But anyway, they said it didn't work. And I said, well, here's the deal. If you give people a product that they like, they will listen. People will buy advertising because they know people are listening. I go, you got to give them something they want to hear. They want to hear the local sports. They want to hear the local news. They want to hear about the local activities. They want to hear what local people are doing if they win awards or whatever. They want to hear from the chief of police from time to time. They want to hear from the mayor from time to time. They want to hear from the basketball coach from time to time, the football coach. You know, and they like a little entertainment.
Sure.
Not to be arrogant, but I was probably the best DJ that had ever been in this area. You know, I knew how to relate to the music and the community. So if you give them something they want, it'll work. But you got to have a strong belief in it. You can't kind of believe it. You can't, gee, I hope this works. I said, this is going to work.
Some people, it's like throwing darts.
And I told my wife, I said, this is going to work. If it doesn't work, I'll get a job doing somewhere else. So, you know, we're okay. Kids got shoes and a coat, they're fine.
You had bread on the table.
Yeah, we're okay.
You mentioned, I think, your dad's philosophy. Do you have other family living around in this area?
No, I have a sister living in Terre Haute.
Oh, okay.
I have an older brother who's passed. My mom and dad have passed, obviously, and my sister, who graduated from Marshall in 1979, lives in Terre Haute with her husband and kids and extended family. I had most of my relatives, aunts, uncles, and so forth, most of them have all passed. So I didn't have a son, so the Spangler name will probably be fading away. But I'm limited in family here.
You've kind of had a great influence, I think, on Marshall. And I guess in the future, what's going to be the support and the movement ahead of Marshall?
You mean from a radio standpoint or just any?
Just as the community's concerned.
Well, you know, I think Marshall's in actually really good shape, to be honest. You know, I think we've got pretty good community leaders. You know, I think the Marshall Autumn Fest continues to be successful. I think most of the events that our pool is one of the best pools in the area, and we want to thank, not only the city, but Jerry Forsyth helped with that, as many other people did as well. You know, got good contributions from the community. And of course, at some point, Jerry's going to pass on. We hope he lives forever, but he won't. But he's been tremendous. And anybody now, Jerry does have part of his personality is unique, but overall, he's been an incredible positive for this community.
Sure has.
And anybody that doesn't think so doesn't know what they're talking about. Now, that doesn't mean that he may not have done something that annoyed you, because we all do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've annoyed a lot of people. I know I didn't do it on purpose, okay? I said everything I did is I thought was in the best interest of the community. I've not been selfish with this community at all, I don't think. I've offered to promote, support anything, whether there's any money in it for me or not. So I think Marshall's in pretty good shape. You know, I think our mayor and city council, we've been pretty good in that area in my whole tenure here. You know, I think Bud was mayor when I came here, Bud Bloodworth, and John Treves and Kenny Smith, and now John Haston. I think we've all been fine. I think, to my knowledge, all the city council members have the best interest in mind, and I think our county board is pretty solid, and we've got pretty good attractions. I think our school system is about as good as you can get. There's flaws but a lot of that are things they have to adhere to that I would change, but that they have to do. But I think we've been in really good shape there, from the first Ross to this Ross. And, I think our administration out there at the school is very good. I think our proximity to Terre Haute and Paris, all the factories, of course, we have the ZF, I still call it TRW,
I do too.
is a major player in our community. But there's several factories in Paris, and we live close by that some people want to live here and work there. Some people want to live here and work in the Terre Haute area. So I think we're in pretty good shape. I mean, our city band concerts are still outstanding. The Gaslight Art Colony, I mean, how many communities this size have an art colony?
Not very many.
So I think there's a lot of positives in this library. Outstanding for the size of the community, everything you can get here. I know that John Tarbell's been one of the key players in that, well as many other people. I just happen to know that he's involved because I know him, but I'm sure you're a major part. But there's a lot of good people is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a lot of people interested in the community. By the way, Allison does a great job. She's fantastic.
Marvelous.
Yeah.
I guess I really enjoy talking to you, JD, and you've kind of filled in a lot of your background and a lot of things about Marshall. I'm going to wrap up with one question for you. If you're in Italy, and that's where you mentioned going.
If I'm in what?
If you're in Italy,
Italy, okay.
and someone said, Marshall, where's that? What would you tell them about Marshall?
Well, I would tell them that it's a small community. Now, if they're in Italy, when I talk to people like on the West Coast, or even in Chicago, or if I'm visiting somewhere else, like I went to Montana to visit Glacier National Park.
That's
and
beautiful.
all that. So first of all, I'll tell somebody if they're in the United States, I tell them, I go, hey, we're about 200 miles south of Chicago, and we are about halfway between St. Louis and Indianapolis on Interstate 70. It's a community of 3,000 people that's got county fairs and summer festivals. Actually, it's a fall festival. And, that's got great community pride and good God-fearing patriotic people. And if I was in Italy, I don't know I exactly say it the same, but I'd say it's in the middle of the country. It's a small town that has great community pride and loves its sports teams and its holidays. And it's the kind of town where you can go to your neighbor and the neighbor would help you. Like in some major metropolitan areas, you want to build a fence as quickly as you can, and you never even talk to them.
You don't know them.
You don't know them, and you don't want to know them. Here, I know them. I know I can get help from them. I used this example when I first moved here to my wife, who'd been basically living in San Francisco and Chicago.
Wow.
I said, here, if you have a flat tire, somebody will stop and help you. If you're in a big city, people give you the finger as you drive by because you're clogging traffic.
That's exactly.
They go, move that piece of crap, Here they stop and, hey, can I help you? Or if your car's stalled for any reason.
And I think you came back to this small community. We've got a wonderful base of volunteers.
We do.
I mean, people are volunteers on so many things.
We do.
And that's what helps make also successful.
Yes. Yeah, we do. We got a lot of people that volunteer their time.
And that's fortunate for a small town or any town.
Well,
Really.
you need it for a small town to really flourish like we're flourishing. And you can't do that if you're greedy, if you're selfish. You can't do that. That's like anybody that came to me at the radio station and wanted help with some event of any kind. Almost, I can't think of, I probably did, but I can't think of any instance that I didn't give them help in some way. mention fundraising events. You know, people had, you know, their house burned down and were taking donations, or they need clothing or whatever, you know. One of the things, when you own a business, you know, and you had your own business, is people come to you for donations for lots of things.
Oh, sure.
And I told them, I go, I'm making my, you know, I will promote any fundraising event you have, because I had the radio to do that. But what I wanted to give my money to was people who were suffering, like from cancer,
Yeah.
or had severe medical challenge, or the house burned down, or, you know, things of that nature.
There's
Now,
always,
cheerleading uniforms are nice. I'll help you do a fundraiser for those. But I'd rather you earn the money for that. You know what I'm saying? So, when there's